Good evening and welcome to the book launch of The Silent Letter. My name is Jorge and I am the director of Romancero Books. Romancero Books is an online bookshop based in London where you can find literature from Latin America and Spain. Tonight I'm very pleased to be invited by Funde Estampa Press to organize the book launch of The Silent Letter, which is this book written by Jaume Subirana and translated into English by Christopher Whyte. We have them both this evening to talk about the book. So now I'm going to go with the intros. Funde Estampa Press is a publishing house based in London and Catalonia, printing since 2019, and specialized in bringing award-winning Catalan language poetry, fiction and essays to English translations. They have published Poetry and Prose by Jordi Javinia and translated by William Hamilton, English Hours by Ferran Soldevilla and translated to English by Alan Yates, or One Day of Life is Life by Joan Maragall and translated by Ron Pupo. Jaume Subirana is the writer of the collection of poems that we're going to talk this evening. Jaume is a writer, translator and professor of literature at the University Pompeu Fabra. He has published 7 collections of poetry, the latest being The Silent Letter. In 1998, he won Catalan poetry's most prestigious prize, the Carles Riba. In 2011, he was awarded the Gabriel Ferrater Prize for Una Pedra Sur. He has published various essays, 3 volumes of award-winning diaries, and has translated Billy Collins, Ted Kosher, and Gary Snyder, to mention just a few. And he has also translated the children's poetry of Robert Louis Stevenson into Catalan. Jaume is currently the vice president of PEN Catalan. With us, we also have Christopher Whyte. Christopher is a writer of poetry in Scottish Gaelic. With his 6th collection, Step by Step, was nominated for 2 national awards. Between 1995 and the year 2000, he published 4 novels in English, and he has translated the poetry of Rilke and Pasolini, as well as poets from Croatia, Catalonia, and Hungary. He's a very well-known writer, he's a very well-known for his controversial, innovative, and groundbreaking work researching and critiquing Scottish literature, with a particular reference to literature theory, gender, and queer studies. He left a prominent career as an academic in the year 2005 to devote himself to writing. Good evening. Welcome, Jaume Subirana and Christopher Whyte. I am going to stop sharing my video so that you can both spotlight video. Good evening, Jaume, and good evening, Christopher. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we like to see you. So
okay, sorry.
Don't worry about your video.
Okay, so good evening. It's a pleasure. Now the formalities are done. It's a pleasure to have you both this evening with me and with us. So I also want to welcome everyone who is behind the screen or inside the screen at your houses. The first question that I want to ask you is. I want you to share with us which one was the reason or the reasons to write this book, to write this book of poetry. Which one were the first steps or stages, or how you started basically to write the book?
Okay, so I understand it's me to answer. First of all, sorry for my broken English. This is the cheapest travel to London that I've done in my life, but I hope the language will not be a barrier for your understanding. I think probably I should say that, let's say I write poems, no poetry books. So when I have a book in my hand, it's always difficult to think about it in terms of when it was written, why it was written. I've been writing poetry since I was 20 something.
Mm-hmm.
I have written some days, I think, too many books. I'm not sure if too many poems, but too many books. But it takes quite a lot for me to finish a book. And the way I work is I write a poem or try to write a poem. I rewrite it, and after a year, I might have, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 poems, no more than that. And then after a number of years, some of them they like group together, and they kind of it makes sense to put them together, and then I start working on them as a book, as a group, and or organize them or rewrite them. So only after gathering a number of them, I can call it a book. In this case, the book I published before the silent letter, which in Catalan reads L'H. I think we will be talking about this. I don't know if you can, yeah, now you have a look at the original Catalan edition. We will go back to this, I think, because there's a lot to tell you about it. So before L'H, I had published this La Pedra Sura, and it was issued in 2011. So from 2011 to 2019-20, it's quite a, I don't know, if it's not a long way, but it's there's a certain time. Then I was lucky enough for Douglas Sattel to read this L'H and to like it, which is something when you write, you don't exactly think about people reading and liking your poetry. At least it's not my case, but it's extremely. It's great when it happens, and I was lucky. I feel really lucky at this because if you know a little bit about Catalan poetry, there's so much poetry and so much good poetry being published every year in Catalan that it's really astonishing, and it was a very good news for me to know that Douglas liked it and simply said, I want to translate it, which is something that usually does not happen.
Yeah. Jaume, just to let people know, Douglas is
hiding somewhere over there.
Yeah, Douglas is the editor, one of the directors from the Stampa Press, which is the publishing house that published this book.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that, Jaume. Christopher, Jaume, I wanted to ask you if have you met before you worked together in the translation into English of this book, and if so, if you met before or not, Jaume, how much were you involved in the translation of this book into English? Because one thing is to translate a novel, fiction, but to translate poetry, to keep the meanings, the metaphors, and other things that poetry has, I believe is quite complicated. And I want you to tell us.
I begin the answer, and then I think Christopher has the word. When the publisher proposed me to translate the book, he asked me if I knew someone to translate it. I had some names in mind. My idea was to have English-speaking translator, and also either a poet or a almost poet translator. And this is why Christopher came to mind. We know each other for a number of years. Okay. That's a way to say it smoothly. And when I wrote him asking him if he was interested in this, his answer was that he was interested. He might then correct me, but he was interested as long as he could like write the translations from the point of view of a creator, of a writer, and that for me that was very good. And then we can talk about the how it worked. But I'm really, I don't know, I feel privileged. I don't know if you would say it like that, but to have him on my side, because even now when I read the English translations, I can more or less read the English. So wow, they say they sound great, and I feel like I would like to know the one who wrote those those poems in English. So Christopher, your turn.
I think I've known Jaume since 1994. I first went to Catalonia in person in 1993, and I fell in love with the language for a sort of inexplicable reason. It's a bit like walking into a room at a party full of people, and there are some people you particularly like and other people you don't want to go close to. And my reaction to Catalan was a feeling of affinity. So the year after, I turned up at a conference at Strathclyde University in Glasgow, and Jaume was there. And afterwards in Barcelona, he gave me a lot of help translating from Catalan. I was putting together a block of modern Catalan writing for a Scottish magazine. And in particular, there was a poem by Gabriel Ferrater, very interesting Catalan poet, you know, about his experience of the Civil War, In Memoriam. And Jaume very patiently sat with me and went over that word by word. So I remember that with great pleasure, and I have a debt. I'm very glad he was able to go over these translations and see the points where I'd slipped up or not caught precisely the meaning that he had put into the original.
I think Christopher used these inexplicable reasons. I think the inexplicable reasons are the good ones. There's also a link between Christopher and me, which is a number of common friends or common writers. Maria Marçal is around, and also I think we share this common both poet and translator basis, which makes, for me, I really like to write poetry, but what I like the most is translating good poetry, probably more than writing my own poetry, and reading, discussing, and talking about poetry. So from this point of view, I think we are both on the same boat, and I hope it is shown, or you can see it when you read the translations.
We're in a book launch of poetry, so I think it will be quite interesting to listen some poems from both of you, from Jaume and Christopher. Christopher, is it okay if I call you Chris?
I prefer Christopher, if that's okay. All three syllables.
Of course, don't worry. So yeah, if will it be possible to hear some poems from you, please?
Great. Yeah. Should we read first the Catalan and then the English, or the other way? How do you?
And then English. I think that's best.
Okay. So we've selected 2 poems for this first round, let's say. The first one, it's a prose poem, something that I usually don't do, but this one, it's a short poem written in prose, and the title is Un poema para Cate. A Berlín vam esmorzar a la Literature House per anar després a veure el museu de Kate Kollwitz, allà al costat. Hi anava per recomanació del Narcís, amb el seu poema al cap, i amb la vaga idea d'escriure llavors alguna cosa que hi dialogués. Feia molta calor. L'obra de Kollwitz és corprenedora. La seva biografia impressiona. El carbonet esborrona, quin traç trist, fosc, tant de veritat. I el que me n'ha quedat gravat és el groc i el negre bronzent de les abelles mentre esmorzàvem. La por de la Maria de les abelles a la llum esclatant del sol d'agost. Els ulls i la mà de la Maria, que pinta com un àngel, i mira d'espantar una i una altra les abelles. Cada abella. Tantes abelles.
A poem for Kate. In Berlin, we had breakfast at the Literaturhaus. then went to see the Katakolvitz Museum next door. Narcisse had told me to go, with his poem in my head and the vague idea of writing something that dialogued with it. It was very hot. Kolvitz's work overwhelms. A life story beyond belief. Horrifying charcoal, such sad strokes, so much dark truth. Etched in my mind afterwards, the buzzing yellow and black of the bees at breakfast. Maria afraid of them as the August sunlight exploded, her eyes, her hand that paints like an angel, doing its best to scare them off one by one, each bee, so many bees.
Thank you.
And the second poem is the original title is Ak, which is the name for the I can't say this word in English.
Letter H.
The letter H, but it's still difficult for me. And that, let's say, gives title to the book, and we may afterwards tell you about this. And here we have this Ak in Catalan and silent letter in English. The poem has a quotation from Emily Dickinson.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read the quotation on a letter to Lavinia, to her sister. November always seemed to me the Norway of the year. Okay. H. La tarda sembla un vespre. Els ocells volen baix. Un esquirol s'enfila dalt de tot de l'avet com una taca viva per entre troncs pelats. Al novembre el ponent remuga taciturn. Un dia més del compte, canta Dylan de fons. A tots dos ens sap greu. Qui sap si té raó? L'esquirol torna i diu, parlant en noruec, està a punt de passar. Ve la neu, la quietud. I hi ha una pausa muda, com la H de l'hivern.
The silent letter. This afternoon could be an evening. Birds fly low. A squirrel runs all the way up the fir tree, living mark between bare trunks. November. The west wind mutters taciturn. One more day gone, Dylan singing in the background. We both regret it. Who knows if he's right? Coming back, the squirrel speaks Norwegian. It's about to happen. Soon comes snow and peace. A silent pause next. Winter's silent letter.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for your readings, and actually thank you for reading this one, because I wanted to ask both of you about the title of the collection of poems. Why is the act, and why that silent letter?
I can answer about the act. The silent letter. It's Christopher's great adding to it. Well, act which for this I feel like it's something that has to do with our experience of our poetry experience, and more than poetry. This idea of something that is there and it's not there, that it's empty and it's void and has a presence at the same time. We say in Catalan or in Spanish, it's una lletra muda, so a letter that cannot speak, but at the same time it is speaking and means without saying. I don't know. When you try to tell about this, it sounds terrible. But this is probably why I write poems, because you look or you listen at yourself like being a North American evangelist preacher. But it has to do with meaning, with saying without saying, with this idea of winter, of void, etc. All these things together. The problem was how to translate it into English. So I now pass the being too Christopher.
We had a disagreement here. I thought we should just translate it with the letter H, just the letter there. And I suggested this should be the title of the book of poems, because you couldn't put Aitch. That's very ugly in English. And you know, the concept of the H as a silent letter, it's there in French, in Spanish, in Catalan. It's quite foreign in English. But all the way through, the poet had to have the last word, especially when he's somebody who speaks English as well as Jaume does and has such a familiarity with the English language. So we negotiated and discussed, and Doug strongly felt that H wasn't the right way to give the title for the book. And the silent letter is attractive too because of the ambivalence of the word letter. It can express a number of different things. And sometimes when you move poems from one language to another, quite a lot of things are lost, but often things get added on, and you need those extras to fire up the...
I think we really have to celebrate the things that are added. I don't agree with that idea of poetry is what is lost. I'm not worried about or interested on what is lost, and I'm frankly much more interested in what is added and won when you move poetry or literature from one language to the other. And in this case, Christopher is talking about how we work, and it was great to be able to, both of us, in his case, extremely well, but in my case, more or less, be able to read both languages and to know both languages and to work on both on both sides of the field. And we, let's say, intensely discussed on every poem and every. No, it's not possible to always agree on all the options, and lately you have to be responsible for the last options. His name is on the translation, so he is responsible for the good results of the translation. And we had to discuss and put Doug, the publisher, on the discussion when it came to the book title. But apart from that, I think that for the rest, it was the result of our working together and our intense working together, which, at least from my point of view, this has been probably the only very good thing about the pandemics, because I sent him the proposal or asked him to do the job, if we can call this a job, and once he agreed, he's a very intense working man. He's an express train. I'm more kind of an old on-off bicycle, I don't know, or motorcycle, but he worked a lot on the versions of translation. He sent them to me. We discussed poem by poem, and it was extremely exciting to discuss poem by poem. And we had it done on a relatively short bunch of time.
My feeling is that poems are inherently promiscuous. They want to be translated. They want to travel through languages. And it's a question of allowing the two languages to talk to one another, comparing the resources, comparing what's there. The challenge here was that these are very self-effacing poems. They're almost throwaway. They don't trumpet their own significance. And the poems are very short, the lines are very short. And that means as a translator, you can't afford to make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you're translating big stanzas and regular meter, you have to pad. There are spaces that need filling up. But with short poems, every single word counts. And also I found that I needed to inject some rhythm into the English sometimes to give the rhythm a sense of inevitability, or just that it made sense, that the rhythm carried the poems forward. But as I say, short, apparently very simple poems can be very, very tough, because you can't, it's like dancing and having an audience up very close. You can't allow yourself to make a false move.
For the shorter ones, I think at some point I felt like, how in hell will he be able to move this into another language? And here is when you are really happy at having not only a translator, but a poet and translator at your side.
Yeah. I guess it's also that because you know each other quite well, you are friends, you understand each other, what you No?
But in this case, at least from my point of view, it has more to do with respect. I think that I want to think that even if we didn't know each one so well, once you choose your translator, or you have your translator on your side, and you have to respect his point of view and his work.
It's very important working with a poet who also translates, because he understands what goes on. There's a lovely story about Joseph Brodsky, the Russian poet who got the Nobel Prize, that his Swedish translator came at one point and said, Joseph, I just to make a slight change in these two lines because it works so well in Swedish. And Brodsky said, that's exactly what I wanted to say in Russian, but the rhyme wouldn't allow it. So in a sense, the translation, according to this story, was able to realize something that wasn't possible in the original. There are all sorts of interesting, but Jaume, having translated a lot himself, understood what the translator was up against. And I think that made him more understanding and more tolerant.
Well, the fact is, you end up having a new book, and this might be good news.
Yeah.
At least for me, it's good news. Better than having exactly the same, but what does it mean exactly? And what does it mean the same?
Talking about translations, we have one question. Well, we have many questions from one person, from Luis, my dearest friend Luis. So I'm going to read them. The questions are, what is the translation process like in this particular case, but in your general practice? I believe this question was more for Christopher, but as we know, Jaume, you also translate, so let's say the question is for both. Do you ever speak to each other, to the original author, especially with poetry where words reach another level of intimacy? From this, he also asks, how is it to translate intimacy? And what do you do if you can't be in touch with the original author? Who wants to answer first?
I'm not. I don't think I can talk about general laws. I can. I will talk about specific cases. In this case, it was the two of us, and I made something that I had never done before, and I don't know if I will do again, which is let's say, explained to Christopher poem by poem. We read them together. He obviously understands them in Catalan, so I don't need to tell him what does this mean. But sometimes you need to. In this case, for instance, a silent letter. It's like I wrote this on a backyard porch in New England. It was November. I don't know. Sometimes telling things that happened, things that you wanted to do. What this has to do with Dickinson. So I told him about the poem, or told him the poem, and then once he had the first version, he would send it to me, and I will go through his version. This is why I was talking before about respect, because usually I don't like a lot if people get into my writing and they try to change it, but this exchange was extremely interesting and creative for me. But this is this very specific case where you have the original Catalan, he can read the original Catalan, and we are both, I don't know. In other cases, for instance, now I just ended the translation of the last poetry book by Ted Kuzer, and I translated this with a colleague, a friend, who is Michel-Angel Llauger. And in this case, we don't have the author, but we are two poets or two translators. So we discuss about the poems. And here, sometimes we need to one to the other ask, what does this mean, or what this refers to? And again, in this case, the contact or the relation is very creative. And in other cases, when I translated Robert Louis Stevenson's poetry, I was alone, and I could not ask Stevenson about the poems. So you have to figure a way out of your not understanding or not being able to move that or to realize or to make the idea.
My experience is that you're translating a text, not a person. That's really very important. And to some extent, it doesn't matter so much if the poet is alive or dead, because the text is a text. And it's a dialogue between two languages. And any two languages any pair of languages will talk to each other in a specific way, which can't really be reproduced. And my experience in translating is attempting not to get in the way in that dialogue, just to let it happen. It's a bit like a litmus paper. You're not supposed to say it, but I think good translators tend to work very, very fast. It's not a ponderous, slow, rational process. It's something done very quickly, and then you go back a couple of days later and see what has arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And English is a language that doesn't like being translated into. If you want to read European poetry, English is not the language to use. You'll find a great deal more in German or in French or in Italian. Much more foreign literature is available. So translating something into English always has this special feeling of dealing with a language that's beleaguered, embattled, that's very resistant to dialogue with other languages. That's my experience of it.
Uh-huh.
So it has that particular quality, you know, like trying to enter into a fortress that doesn't admit foreigners easily. And we're seeing that that's becoming more and more the truth in political terms of Britain as well.
I was about to ask you, Christopher, if how was translating in general poetry or fiction into English, and how, you know, different is to translate, or it was to translate this book from Jaume to English from another. But what you just said is, you just shocked me a little bit, saying that, you know, like, it's quite not just difficult to translate into English, because English is not a very welcoming language for translations. Do you think it's the same with German, translating German into English? Do you speak German?
I just say that the other language I use a lot is Gaelic.
Okay.
And there's a word in Gaelic that the 20th Alan uses a lot, and it's translated as beautiful. And you can't use beautiful in English in translating.
Okay.
You have to find some way around it, because there are so many words that are problematic. Maybe they've been overused, or there are too many echoes. I just say that the experience of, depending on what language you're working in, it's like, as I say, two people talking, and the nature of the two people dictates the nature of the dialogue. That's what makes it fascinating too, you know.
Yeah. I also got another question for you, Christopher, sorry. And it's, if have you considered, or would you consider to translate this text into Scottish?
There are three languages in Scotland, at least: English, Scots, and Gaelic, and I use two of them, English and Gaelic.
It says, sorry, I know, but is that because the question says Scots?
Yeah, Scots isn't a language I use. I mean, I read it and I can speak it, but I haven't used it for writing in, so okay. That wouldn't be a target language for me. It's quite, somebody else could do that, somebody who has some experience in that area.
I see, thank you. Another comment is a request, actually, and it's about if will it be possible to both of you to talk about the poem is Jonah by the Garonne. Perhaps, Jaume, you can tell us a bit about the story behind this beautiful poem.
Okay, yeah, let's say that it's a piece different to the others, and we have not selected it because it's a long poem.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's two long poems are not very good for public readings. In another life, or in one of my other lives, I'm a scholar, and I've written and made research, and I read and discuss and talk about Josep Carner, who is one of the main Catalan poets. Some discussion about if it's the first, the second, or the third, but that's not important. And he was a traveler, because he was a diplomat. And here I tried to do it. It's not like I forced, but in this case it worked different from other cases. I asked myself to write a long piece. One of the best books by Josep Carner is a long poem or book poem called Nabi,
Mhm.
about the Jonah myth, a rewriting of the Jonah book. So I thought what we discussed with academics, when was this poem written, when was the story of the poem came to Carnet's mind, and I decided to answer this, or to make an appearance in this discussion, not as an academic but as a poet. So I invented a situation where this could come to the mind of Josep Carnet. All this came to me after going to a certain church in Provence, and so I've put together a number of pieces. All of them are possible or reliable, so about Carnet's biography and this church and a number of things, and the Jonah story, but we don't know if this has happened or not. So I wrote this long poem in, well, long, not that long, but a little longer than my other poems, very short poems, and on 5 segments, and that's in the book. So you have to buy the book, and the publisher will be happy, to read it.
The bookshop too.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to talking about the book. Obviously, I wanted to. I'm going to read a quote that it was written. Not by you, not by Christopher neither, at the end of the book, in the text titled Vita Nova, and it was written by Jordi Galvez.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found, after reading the book, I found it very, very interesting, and a very nice way of, no wrap up, but put everything into a sentence. And is in this book, culture is understood as, amongst many others, a way of life lived in private, though by no means a place to hide away from life, to run away from yourself. I want you, Jaume, how do you feel?
Can I make the call to Jordi Galvez? No, first, he's a very good literary critic, but also he's a friend. So you have to keep this in mind when you read the text.
Uh-huh.
He mentions both culture and private life, or your life. My feeling is that the only thing I have is my private life.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only talk from my private life, but I've learned after years of reading literature that, let's say, that I've learned to look at life through the eyes of or I've learned a lot about life through the eyes of Emily Dickinson, of Lippo, or Giuseppe Ungaretti, or Ted Kooser. So my ambition would be that, to some extent, my private life or my private way to look at things might become useful or readable for other people. This is what I think good literature does, and this is what I try to do. Then it's about readers to decide whether that works or not. So there's a lot of my private life in this book, but my private life is not even interesting for me sometimes. So how can it be interesting for any other one? But in a certain segment, I think all our private lives touch other private lives, and that might be more interesting. I don't know.
Thank you. How do you feel, Christopher and Jaume, to read two more poems of
yes.
your book?
Much better reading than feeling like or
Okay, thank you.
We wanted to read this dusk poem, which is on the back side. I don't know if you can see when I showed it.
I can do it for you.
Okay. So let's read this dusk. Llegim i som llegits amb una ala de llum a dins de cada pàgina. Ocells que no veiem, marees abraçades, perfils de les paraules a l'alba de paper, corrent de tinta blava al fil de l'horitzó. Les lletres són nosaltres, surant el panorama.
Dusk. We read and we are read with a wing of light inside every page. Birds that we don't see, tides, the hugs we gave, the silhouettes of words on a paper dawn, blue ink running along the edge of the skyline. We ourselves the letters floating in the background.
That might be the culture side Jordi Galvez refers to, and here it comes the personal life side. The other poem is called Tocar un escriptor mort, and it's something I wrote on the death of Mario Sampere. Those of you who know Catalan poetry, I'm sure you know him. A well-known poet and also a friend. And let's see if my personal life has something to do with yours. Tocar un escriptor mort. Tocar un escriptor mort és desenterrar paraules. És triar palets de riu per llançar-los a la lluna i seure a esperar la veu amb un fil blanc a les mans. Tocar un escriptor mort és girar-li les costures com ens va ensenyar la mare i mirar-nos les mans buides. És furgar-nos les butxaques mentre cauen les monedes. Tocar un escriptor mort abans de la seva mort és el que sol fer la gent. Donar les gràcies, somriure, quedar per veure'ns aviat, agafar-lo fort pel braç. Jo vull tocar-lo ja mort, després que se n'hagi anat. Buscar la vella energia que la nit ha refredat. Palpar-li les alegries i cada llibre i el cap fins a la llengua apagada. Jugar amb l'anell de l'escriba entre els dits amb què desfeia les idees i la rima. Burxar la punta dels dits al final de les mans fortes. Tocar la mort amb paraules, no tocar paraules mortes. Agafar la pedra plana i posar-me-la a la boca com si fos un tros de riu, i fluir i omplir-la tota.
Touching a dead writer. Touching a dead writer means digging up words, means picking river pebbles to throw them at the moon, sitting waiting for a voice, a white thread in your hands. Touching a dead writer means turning out his seams the way our mother showed us, finding our hands empty, means ransacking our pockets as the coins tumble out. Touching a dead writer before he's dead is what people usually do. Thank him and smile, agree to meet up soon, take hold of his arm. I want to touch him already dead, after he's gone, to look for the old energy which night has chilled, to touch what gave him joy, every book, his head right to his silent tongue, to play with the writer's ring amidst those fingers that undid ideas, rhymes, to jab the fingertips at the end of those strong hands, to touch death with words, not to touch dead words, to take the flat stone and put it in my mouth as if it were part of a river, to flow, filling it all.
I hope you now understand why I'm so happy to have Christopher by my side.
For me, what I love about these poems is their refusal to be important. That's a very, very interesting aspect. Refusal to strike an attitude or to proclaim, just the refusal to be important. I think that's a very powerful strategy and a powerful reality too.
Definitely. Christopher, which one was the most challenging poem to translate and why? Question from the audience.
They were all challenging to translate. I've already said, because when the lines are so short and there are so few words, you can't really afford to put a step wrong. But this last poem, for example, there's a definite rhythm in each line which you can hear. And so the English has to have the same rhythm, and you can't afford to have a short line or to leave a space. And there's the danger of padding. So it's really a question of balancing things out, and also the constant problem that ideally I don't want it to sound like a translation in English. It should sound perfectly natural in English. And that takes a lot of work,
Definitely. The same person is asking also if is it more difficult to translate a personal poem than a poem written by someone else?
I just say again, you're translating a text. They say the poet himself is not the best person to explain a poem. He's the last person you should turn to. The text is there, and that's your friend. So constantly with the English version, if you look back at the Catalan, often you get solutions you didn't see in the first place. It makes it much simpler, but the text is your touchstone. And it doesn't really matter if it's a personal poem or something more formal or more distant. The words, poetry is made of words, not ideas.
Right. I guess it's also like, you know, when you go to an exhibition and then you see a sculptor or a painting, and then instead of going to see the artwork, you go to read the text that is explaining you what you are going to see. Now, so it's like, let yourself enjoy it, or you know, analyze what the painting is telling you before reading the text. So it is, yeah, I agree with you that the text is the text, and this is what you should focus on, definitely. Yeah. If there is any other questions, you are all more than welcome to send them to the chat. Also, Jaume and Christopher, if there is anything else that you want to talk about, discuss about, mention that I haven't, or you know, it didn't come up because of it was not in the questions, but you really want to talk about it, please go ahead with that. There are a few more questions. If you can both, well, I believe this is more for Jaume, but if you can say something about the organization and the structure of the book. For the ones that you don't have the book at home, I would say the book is split in two groups of poems. It starts with one, and then there are two big sections, I would say. And then at the end, you find the text from Jordi Galvez, which is I found it beautiful too. So yeah, Jaume, all yours.
About the organization, it comes back to when I organized, if we could say that, LAG, the original Catalan book. Once again, I work with poems, and then I have the poems, and I try to put them together. There's a number of poems that have to do with traveling or being in places different from my own place. And I thought this might go more or less well together. Other poems, they have to do with the experience of looking at, and then I tried to put them together. I don't know, it's never easy, but at some point it kind of makes some sense. Then after years, you learn tricks from the greats, from the masters. Josep Carné, not only Josep Carné, but was very good at finding the first poem and the last poem for every section. And sometimes once you have your first and last poem, that section, it's like, whoop, it gets up, and it makes more sense what can go there and what that cannot go there, let's say. From this point of view, when we translated it to English, the publisher, we discussed with the publisher, and we thought it would be good to have an introduction to Catalan poetry and to my poetry and a number of things. I think these ideas are good, but it's not always easy to know how to do it, or to get to know it, to have it. Finally, we spoke with Jordi, and Jordi has written a very personal approach to both the book and Catalan poetry, and I think it's good to have it. And it also goes at the end of the book, because when you like poetry, you like the poems, and I agree with Christopher. It's a text, and you have to go directly to the text, and then all the other paratexts. I don't know if you use this word in English, but they are okay. But it's plus, it's extra, so it's not the thing you are looking for.
Okay. Thank you. There are so many questions now. Thank you very much. I've got another question from Celia, and it's, what is the story behind the Miles Davis quote at the beginning of the book? I actually thought about to ask you this, but I was like, well, I'm going to leave it because I'm sure someone will.
It's a little. I cannot say a joke if I say Miles Davis, because it's after, I don't know, after Jesus Christ and some other humans, it's top of the tops. But it's weird, because I'm into literature, and at the very same time, literature is very important to me. And from time to time, I feel we give to it too much importance, and we think writers are great. And so this tendency to have a quotation at the very beginning that tells you about the book. So a scholar will tell his students or her students about the book because of the quotation. I decided it was good to have a quotation from someone who usually is not quoted. So I'm not using T.S. Eliot, or I'm not using I don't know who. But at the very same time, music is very important for me. I think you can more or less deduct it from the book. And I really think what Miles Davis did, it's extraordinary. And to some extent, at some point in another direction, I would like to do that. And I really like this when I read this, something said from someone that I really admired, with this idea that after a long way, you more or less get to where you think you wanted to get. And this is my feeling with poetry. This is my seventh book. If I didn't know about me and I reading or talking about someone else who has published 7 books, I would say, okay, that's enough. Why didn't you stop at the 4th or the 5th? Why do we need to stand your 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th?
Yeah.
But at the same time, my feeling is like, okay, this now, I don't know if it's good or very good or not that good, but this really now sounds like I would like, or I could imagine my poetry to sound, and that's the reason.
Jaume, do you want to read the quote? Because
sorry. Yeah, I'm talking about
the book available in the bookshop.
Yeah, but it's, well, maybe any English speaker would say it better than me, but man, sometimes it takes you a long time to sound like yourself. And here you can play with this idea of sound, and the music sounds like oneself, but poetry or literature also sounds like yourself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I don't wear a trumpet, but I do what I can.
Well, you play music with your words.
I try to.
A few more questions for Jaume. Which one is your favorite which ones, sorry, are your favorite poets in English? And did you find anything from those poets in the English translation of your own poems?
Wow. No, or about the translation, it's what I find is Christopher's voice, which I like a lot, and also it's really strange. I don't know if anyone in the audience has had this experience, but it's really weird, because it's like you listen to what you know the poems, but they really sound different, and it sounds great. Mm-hmm. For me, sometimes better than in the original in Catalan. So that's great. About my favorite poems, it's like with Catalan poetry. I would always want to have a long list, not a short list. I've translated Seamus Heaney, and he's a great poet for me. But I also really love the children's poetry from Stevenson, who I know it's not a very, I don't know, intellectually recognized poet, but I really like what happens in those poems.
Mm-hmm.
The voice of a child going through the mind of a man, and you being able to see both things at the same time, and believing it, and really enjoying it. So these are two names that I've worked with, but I don't know. I might begin to quote now a number of poets, but a lot of them, let's say.
I got another question for you, and it's about the concept of place. If you can talk about place in the book, because for this yes, it seems in a sense like a book of travels.
What happens in the book is that I would say there are a lot of places, not place, but places. And
the concept of,
yeah, and it's also a book about displacement. This comes with trouble, but I feel it, or I think this is a good thing. At least it has been a good thing for me. I like traveling. I've lived abroad, and I'm really happy when I'm home. But now I feel uncomfortable at the fact of not being able to move away. So, and I think, but in general, this is like what Christopher was saying. We writers are not that, when we begin talking about literature, it's not. But I think that displacement has a lot to do with poetry. From this, let's say, original idea of what a metaphor is, like it's moving and putting together or putting aside different feelings, places, things you see, things you find, and this moving from one place to another, being able to be in one place and in another at the same time. It's, let's say, something that interests me. For instance, in that piece about Gymnasium a la Garona, there's also the image of the river, and I really like the image of the river because it's a very good image, like Festina Lente. It's like at the same time you have a river stays and moves at the same time, and this is something I would like to think literature should try to do.
Mm-hmm.
All this sounds terrible in English. I hope you forgive me.
Jaume, another question for you regarding rhythm. What it's like to hear a translation of your own poem in a new pentameter?
In this case, I've been extremely lucky with Christopher. I knew before asking him to translate the poems that this is important for him, because we have discussed a lot about literature and poetry, and I know how focused and how obsessed he can get with getting a good rhythm. It is important for me in my original Catalan language, and when I write, rhythm is important. Not always rhyme, but always not always rhyme, but always rhythm. And so it was important for me, and it's good to be able to catch it or to hear it when I read the translations. And it's also a way to learn again that you can more or less be able to understand or to speak a language, but it has nothing to do with writing in that language.
Mm-hmm. I see. Christopher, you open Pandora's box when you mention about how difficult is to translate literature into English. So let's go to that Pandora's box again. Someone has asked if you could develop or explain the reasons why English is a fortress when translating into.
Translation is a very political activity, however innocently or poetically you do it. And I always think of poetry as strong language. Poetry doesn't need to speak loudly, but it's very difficult to shut poetry up. So translating poetry is one of the most political acts you can do. The simple answer would be to say that generally English speakers don't learn other languages. That's symptomatic of the way English is at the moment. And if in translating you're examining the relationship between two languages, like the relationship between two people, that's dictated by what has gone on. So, but also there's the literal fact. You asked about German. I read German pretty well, and at its best, the function of Germany is to be a kind of channel connecting Slavic Europe and the rest of Europe to the West, passing backwards and forwards. And if you want to study the Belarus short story, for example, you'll find it in German. Or if you want to read some Lithuanian novels, they'll be translated into German. Or a Slovenian writer like Boris Pahor, it's there in German and in Italian. In English, you'll find very, very little. So I'm just observing a situation that is there, a fact that seems to me to be undeniable.
Thank you, Christopher. I ran out of questions, but I want to ask you one about the short or long term plans in the future. Like, what are you working on at the moment? Or if you have any other presentations of this book, or because under the current circumstances, obviously you know, ideally we would have been doing this somewhere with a glass of wine, and then you will both be.
Let's hope we will do it at some point.
Writing, you know, taking the books, but now it's not possible. So yeah. Oh, another question coming. Sorry. Before I ask you the last one, I'm gonna go for this one. Related to translation, and this is for both of you, besides sound and meaning, words also have the grain and texture of an age, a concept around them that might not exist anymore. Do you translate all texts like Stevenson's in your case, Jaume? And if so, how do you deal with that?
I usually translate contemporary literature, so Stevenson was my exception from this point of view. On that case, I was lucky enough that the publisher was a children's publisher, so they wanted this to be published in the collection devoted to very young boys and girls, and I'm not a specialist, so in that specific case, what I tried to do is I understood these were poems that were used for kids to learn how to memorize poems in English. Mm-hmm. So I tried them to work the same way in Catalan. So in that specific case, I was not a philologist. I was my main goal was that they sounded well, and I was very very strongly devoted to rhythm and to understanding and everything in Catalan, more than to translating the age thing in that case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. One more question for you, Christopher. This person said that you have translated poetry from a number of languages into English. What specific feeling do you associate with translating from Catalan compared to translating from other European languages? If you found any, you know, if you feel something different or not.
Very hard to answer that. Very hard to answer that. I have an instinctive love for the Catalan language, just for the sound of it. And when I first went to Barcelona in 1993, I loved the bilingualism. I'd never come across that degree of easy and unconscious interchange between two languages. I thought people didn't actually realize if they were speaking Spanish to you or Catalan. It was so instinctive for them. I found it very, very rich and very, very exciting. So I don't have an answer to the question itself.
Well, Thank you. And now, yeah, I'm going to ask you what I was wanted to ask you. Like, what are you working at the moment? What are you?
I have an ongoing commitment to this woman, a Russian poet called Marina Tsvetaeva, writing mainly in the 1910s and 1920s. Her poetry is very shocking because she didn't realize, certainly then, but even today, that women are not allowed to say certain things and talk about certain things. And when she'd been married for a year and a half, she entered into a relationship with an older woman poet and wrote a wonderful series of poems, just explaining perfectly simply what was happening to her. So that's very exciting and very challenging for me too, because of breaking taboos and breaking silences. So I have an ongoing commitment to working with her from Russian.
That's very interesting. Thank you. What about you, Jaume?
I liked about Christopher showing a book. So sorry for this. I have just together with Michelangelo Llauger, I've just finished. I don't know. Can you see it?
Now we can.
Okay. We've just finished translating this Ted Kuzer's Red Stilts. In fact, it's the last book by Ted Kuzer, just published in the States, and the same publisher. We've just signed the contract to translate the last book by Billy Collins, that it's called Whale Day and other poems. So I'm really excited at being translating poems poets that I like into Catalan, and this on one side. On the other side, I don't know if it happens to some of you, but when I close a book or finish a book, I feel like that's it. So I'm done, and I'm on the I'm done part of my poetry life. I don't know if I will write more poetry or not. I'm really excited. You go around with the translation, with working with Christopher, with a translation into a volume translated into Spanish. It's about to be published too. So I would not say overwhelmed, but very happy to be working with translations from other people and from my own poetry more than with new things.
Okay, interesting. On top of giving teaching at the university.
Yeah, but that's yeah. Well, if you look at it from that point of view, this week we have been discussing about, or reading and discussing about Petrarca, which is great. So
yeah, that's amazing.
You work, yeah, you travel with giants, so that's good.
That's very
This
nice.
is also one of the good things about translation. You already know that the material is good and the poetry is good. When you start a poem by yourself, you don't know what kind of poetry will be that. Whereas when you translate, you already know that the stuff is good before you began.
That's nice. We have time for one more question before we say goodbyes, and it's from Montserrat. To both of you, how relevant or helpful is intertextuality when what do you read when you are translating?
Wow, Christopher.
I don't have an answer to that, but when I'm translating, I can't bear any background noise. It's just, you know, even a car outside on the street. So I have permittedly big headphones that I can put on just to plug out any kind of noise. So you need that sort of silence. Maybe you need the absence of a text just to listen to the original coming through in the new language and see what emerges.
I see. Jaume?
In my case, I would say I think I'm answering on the move, but I think that I will agree with Christopher when it comes to translation. So I really need to be focused on what I'm translating. But it works exactly the other way when I write. I love intertextuality, and I write listening at music and looking at paintings and discussing other people, and I quote and I rewrite and I do all kind of this cooking stuff. So I really love intertextuality, we could say, put it this way when I write.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaume. And
Okay.
behind over there are Douglas and Berta, the publishers and the editors of Fund Estampa. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to organize this book launch. This is the book written by Jaume and Christopher and published by Fund Estampa Press. It's available in Romancero Books, of course. Get it. It will take you to a very interesting and nice journey. So have a look at the book. And thank you very much for everyone who joined the book launch. And I hope you have a nice weekend. And I see you soon around. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.